Welcome to Genomics Now, a podcast series where you can learn how genomics is developing in England's NHS. This podcast series is recorded in 2024 and is part of the North Thames Genomic Medicine Services Educational Toolkit. In each bite-sized episode, we explore what is changing in genomics. We answer the questions on genomics we've been asked by the different healthcare professionals. We talk about the ways genomics may impact different healthcare roles and how genomics can be used to successfully improve patient care. Hello, I am Dr. Shazia Mahamdallie, and I'm part of the North Thames Genomic Medicine Services Workforce Education and Training Team. This is the first episode of our 5-part podcast series on liquid biopsies, a group of tests that look for evidence of circulating tumour DNA shed by cancer into the patient's bloodstream. In this series of conversations, we start to explain how this cutting-edge genomic technology is revolutionising lung cancer diagnostics. In today's episode, I'm joined by Paul Ryves, the Programme Director for the North Thames Genomic Medicine Service Alliance. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Shazia, and thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So today's episode is about NHS England is leading the way in developing and adopting cutting-edge new genomic technologies. So back in March this year, for our listeners, that's in 2024, the North Thames Genomics Labs appeared in the news story about a new blood test that can reveal better lung cancer treatments. Can you explain a little more about what this new test is and how it fits into what they are calling the NHS Genomic Networks of Excellence?
Yeah, so the Networks of Excellence. So in October 2022, NHS England announced it would be funding a new innovative networks to build evidence-based and adoption models for advanced genomic technologies. So these networks, which are known as the NHS Genomic Networks of Excellence, bring together the NHS, academia, third sector, industry, partners to leverage their expertise and resources from the kind of broader genomics ecosystem. So the goal is rapidly inform commissioning decisions going forward, ensuring the latest genomic advancements can benefit patients as quickly as possible. So one of these developments that we've been working on is the use of blood samples to test for circulating tumour DNA. So this is often referred to as a ctDNA test, which can also be referred to as a liquid biopsy or circulating biomarker blood test. So this initiative will build on an existing project, such as those targeting late-stage non-small lung cancer, and aims to expand innovating testing to the other tumor types, should I say. So this network will collaborate with prestigious institutions like the Cancer Research, Christie Cancer Research UK, Manchester Institute, King's Health Partners, and several NIHR biomedical research centres.
Thanks, Paul. That's a great collaboration. So we've got all these different people collaborating together. And then you talked about different types of tumours that ctDNA could potentially be used on. But specifically, the Networks of Excellence you've been working on is a lung cancer pilot. So can you tell us we're in phase 3 at the moment, but can you tell us about phases 1 and 2 and how that actually allowed us to move into phase 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify the lung, what we're currently doing in the program of the ctDNA lung pilot is as what's actually led to the Network of Excellence. So this was a separately commissioned project. So NHS England, probably around 2 years ago, commissioned North Thames in partnership with the North East and Yorkshire GMSA to lead this pilot nationally. So what happened in phase 1 was each GMSA region, so the 7 of us, were all provided with some funding to procure a commercial provider, should I say, and that was either Guardant or Foundation One, who are their technology is leading that ctDNA technology. So what we did was we delivered the testing using commercially available technology. So that saw patient samples leave the UK to go to the US and to Germany, where Guardant based in the US and Foundation based in Germany. So within that first phase, we had up to 700 patients. And then what happened was we wanted to continue the pilot, and phase 2 saw the Royal Marsden come on board in terms of delivering the testing from their lab in London. Now, to do that, Marsden partnered with Guardant to do what they call a technology transfer. So that was bringing Guardant's technology into the lab so that we could deliver it from an NHS laboratory environment. So In phase 2, we increased the number of patients to access the test by 1,800. So across the 2 phases, I think it was up to around 2,500 patients had access to the test, and that came from across 81 trusts in England, which is fantastic. During both phases, we collected pilot data. We needed to do this to assess the quality of the ctDNA testing, the turnaround times, especially moving it from a commercial provider whose turnaround times were very, very quick to what we could deliver and test within that NHS environment. And the Marsden did a fantastic job of getting that over the line very, very quickly. Looking at the outcome of patients and where, especially where those test reports indicated the presence of genetic changes and what that clinical impact of the test result compared to the current pathway would be. So as this is an emerging technology, it was also very vital to run an economic assessment and evaluation of the new pathway. So NHS England commissioned a third-party provider to undertake this work to ensure there was a full cost-benefit analysis carried out. So North Thames ran the procurement process, and we partnered a company called Edge Health to deliver that piece of work to show how the economics would work if we were to fully commission this test on the National Test Directory. So we're going back to the start of the question. So we're currently sitting in phase 3. So what this means is we've seen a further 10,000 tests commissioned for 24-25 by NHS England, which obviously widens the access to the patients in a much greater capacity. So essentially any trust in England that has a lung cancer pathway can now access this test once they've been onboarded. So this decision was relatively based on the success of the early phases of the pilot. And we knew the clinical utility was there before we started, but we want to test this a little bit further in terms of before it gets fully commissioned. Phase 3 will also see Manchester as the second GLH hub to deliver the testing. So it'll be a 2-hub testing delivery strategy. And then there's a bit of sort of continuity there and business continuity if there's any issues.
So what would success look like for phase 3 of the pilot?
So I think phase 3 is a major step between, that small scale pilot of 2,500 patients to moving to more kind of what we would classify as business as usual in the NHS. So this means that any trust, as I mentioned in England with their lung pathway, can access the test where they've got patients who meet the eligibility criteria. I think what was a huge challenge for us in phases 1 and 2 was the information governance, especially around the collection of data. It's obviously very important that we keep that data secure, but it was quite time consuming in terms of we need that data for the health economics. So I think what that does do in this phase is that we don't need that data any longer because we've been provided through phases 1 and 2. So, for those clinical teams wishing to use this test and kind of be onboarded, it's a much easier process in embedding that in their local pathway.
So how do you get people engaged in a pilot like this, the IG people or the lab people or clinicians and patients? How do you go about doing that?
So if I take North Thames, I was personally very lucky. I worked with very experienced clinicians in the area. So Dr. Sanjay Popat, who based out of Marsden, who involved with leading, Dr. Sanjay was very much involved with this right at the start, along with Dr. Ali Greystoke from the North East and Yorkshire area. So for us, we had very good inroads in linking with many of the colleagues around the North London trusts in terms of the benefit of the test. And it was something that people were aware of already pre-pilot, where they could actually request these tests through their own trust if they could had the affordability to do that. So what I was aware of working with my other colleagues in the GMSA regions, that various things like educational events were held. They were often filmed, so they could be on demand and put on people's websites and social media. So I think overall, nationally, there was a mix of formal education and one-to-one discussions. So I think we have learned a lot from the first couple of phases of this pilot, and I think we'll be going forward working with patient groups, charities, key workforce as we onboard new trusts for the next phase of the pilot.
From all of your experience of service transformation projects in your program director role, how do you envisage the ctDNA blood test becoming standard of care?
So I think ultimately, for it to be a true standard of care test, it really needs to be on the National Genomic Test Directory. So whilst the wider access is happening this year with the 10,000 patients, that's not necessarily going to catch all of the potential population that might be eligible for that test. We think it might even be double that. So I think to enable that, it needs to be on the test directory. So it's ready, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's readily accessed just because it's there. So, not just this test, but other tests on the directory. So raising that awareness, the test that it's available, how to access that test in terms of the operational side, but also making sure we have the educational resources to support adoption of the ctDNA of this test and many others by the workforce. So it goes back to my point there about that upskilling and genomic literacy, so they can safely use that test in their clinical practice.
So you said about there were 10,000 people potentially in this next pilot, which is happening now. And then you talked about uptake. What advice would you give anyone looking to integrate ctDNA testing into their lung cancer pathways?
I think, this, as we've sort of discussed, genomics can be quite a need for quite a large part of the workforce. So I think I'd encourage clinical teams across the country to really speak to their local, regional GMSA regions, GLH teams about what the ctDNA test actually means and what it can do to that pathway in terms of the lung pathway, and how, it's also an opportunity to improve your genomic literacy. We're trying to do lots of resources about supporting this, educational resources. So, we know it's a test, it's proven it can help improve patient care and speed up that time to patient's treatment, which I think is really, really important. And this is a test that's funded by the NHS, so it's available. Just need to understand how to be onboarded and how to access that kit. So I'd say, as I've said, reach out to your local GMSA team, learn about it, and then really learn how to access it and decide whether you want to use that in your pathway or not.
It's got to be curious and then ask and then see where you go. So thanks, Paul. So the title of this podcast is Genomics Now, but we always like to end on what's next for genomics in this space. So could you give us a little bit of your insight into that?
So going to the top of the program, we obviously talked about networks of excellence. So I think our big, whilst phase 3 is still continuing, we have a part to play in that as a GMSA. Our next focus is really around, in terms of where this circulating tumor biomarker network of excellence is born out of this lung program, is to expedite, shall I say, that introduction of a ctDNA test into other cancer care pathways. So we've only piloted it as we've discussed in lung so far, but I think what this network will do is certainly bring a range of experts together to. It's really what we're going to do now is identify and assess which clinical cancer pathway, should I say, could benefit from this circulating biomarker technology. So what I think is really crucial is to get this eventually introduced on the national test directory for the lung as a first point of call, so we can ensure that all patients across England can benefit if eligible. And whilst this technology is around in countries like America, Canada, and Japan, however, I think we can, this can be a world leading in implementing a circulating biomarker test within the National Health Service. And I think that's a really great achievement and not been done anywhere else in the world.
So it all went well with pilot, the third phase 3 of the pilot, and your operational processes are in play. And if somebody's listening to this in 5 years, how long do you think that it could be possible that this could be onto the National Test Directory?
I think for us, the hope is actually next year. So 25, 26 is the aim. We do need to tighten up some of the things in the health economics, but it's looking positive. But this is a huge investment from an NHS England perspective, so we've got to get it right. And I think we hope to do over the network of excellence will, over the next 2 years, we'll look at these other pathways and present almost a case back to NHS England for them to make those commissioning decisions. Now, who knows when they might be available on the test directory, but that's the aim. So, who knows where we'll be at the end of 2026. So, but hopefully going back to the lung, that fingers crossed, that will be on the test directory next year.
Exciting time. So we definitely look forward to the outcomes of this pilot for the lung cancer and then where it could roll potentially. So thank you, Paul, for joining me today in this conversation. Thank you for listening to this episode of Genomics Now, a series of conversations hosted by healthcare professionals. The North Thames Genomic Medicine Service aims to complement other genomic-focused educational tools with these bite-sized podcasts. So do visit our website for more resources and updates on genomic-based clinical developments and research. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share your thoughts and spread the word by tagging the North Thames Genomic Medicine Service on social media.